stitches, and hopefully by the end of the class everyone is going to have an aha moment, which are awful nice, because I'm going to explain everything about column stitches, and it's a little bit complicated, so it's, you know, more the intermediate level, but I think everyone can handle it. Now, column stitches are really important, and everyone should practice, practice, practice to learn how to do them. It adds a lot of, I don't know what the word is, flair, more professional, better looking to any embroidery that you do. Now, the difference, people were asking me, well, can't I just use, you know, this satin stitches? I'm going to show you the difference. Satin stitches, let's click over to there, and I just did the outline tool and generate. Satin stitch is just plain. It's equal on each side, it's flat on both sides. Those are great for outlines or, you know, making a quick circle. But if you're doing something a little more intricate, you need something a little bit better. So that's a satin stitch, which is a little bit different in construction from a column stitch. A column stitch, you're basically making a column and you're telling Embird where to put everything. So you can make this side longer, shorter, you can change it a lot. So yes, satin stitches are great. They're great for a lot of things. You will find that doing column stitches will improve a lot of things, especially applique, because you can get really fancy. You have to be a little more careful, obviously, with applique. You don't want to go outside your applique material, but we're going to show you how to do it. So the first thing is we are working in Studio, and we are going to bring in our picture. So we go up here to Image, and we're going to import it, and it's right here. And that was the wrong turkey. No, that was the right turkey from last week. Oops. This is the right picture. This is our flower, and it's just a simple outline. So let's open it, and it should be, it's actually a bit big, but let's check. So we go to Image, Edit Image Window, and you click over to this one. Let's make it a little bit smaller. Let's put it in a 5x7 hoop. Because the one thing about column stitches and satin stitches, you cannot make them too big. They will not work. If you get spots where there's no stitches after you generate them, then that means your stitches are too wide. So there we go. Excuse me, our pretty picture. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Now the first way to do column stitches, you guys probably know, and there's nothing wrong with it, and I'm going to add to it. So we're going to take the fill tool, and I'm just going to do just quickly here, this like plotting any other fill thing. Okay, bend at the curves. We all know this hopefully by now, but let's do it anyways. Bend at the curves, and I'm just going to move that, push my other one in there, squish it in. My mouse really sucks. Mental reminder, Dawn, I need a new mouse up here. Thank you. Okay, so there we go. So that's fine. And we're going to switch to auto column. And if you notice, there's really no more options to it. There's a few up here, but there's really no options to it. Now let's generate. And we do have, if we flip into 3D, that's a very beautiful column stitches. However, you notice it's a little bit, you know, it's not even, I guess is the word. It's a little bit thicker here, and it's just basically basic. So we want to add a little to that, and there's a really quick way to do that. We're going to go into node editing, and what you can do is you click on one of the square nodes. So let's click on one, and you right click, and we're going to go to right here, place direction node here. So we're going to place that here. Now, I find this a little bit fiddly, but did you see? This is the direction node, and it kind of, for whatever reason, appears underneath. But this is a direction node. So I'll pull it way out so everyone can see. And it's a dotted line, so that's going to dictate the direction of the stitches. So let's put it up at a really weird angle. Let's put this guy back, though. And let's generate. And you can't really see it there, so let's look. See, it changed the angle of the stitches. You probably have to put a bit more. So that's how you can make that a little bit fancier. Why don't we do another one so we can, why don't I change this color? It's terrible. How about light pink? Maybe we can see better on light pink. Yep, you can see it better now. It didn't show well enough. See how it changed the angles of the stitches? Now that doesn't look great because it's all bunched up there. But again, you just go to Node Editing, Mode, and normal. That's how you do that. But we can do a little bit better. That's the easy way, and that'll work for a lot of things, but not for everything. So that's good. Let's get rid of it though, even though it's good. And let's go into this tool right here over on the left, and that is the column tool. And when you click on that, a whole bunch of things come up and people get a little bit confused. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to explain. So this is the width of your stitch, and I'm going to show you how to play around with that and how that works. And there's 3 different types. There's A, B, and C. And we're going to start off with A, and I will explain to you how A works. But let's go through everything. Now this one here, if you like snap to nodes, snap to different things, this is where you can do that. Now if you hover over it, you can see it. Snap to work area edges, so your work area, it'll snap right to it. This one is, what is this one? Snap to guidelines. That would be really handy. So if you pull out a guideline, it will snap to it. So if you want a straight line, it's going to snap to it. I think that one's brilliant. That might be handy. I might even use that one. Snap to nodes, that one's also handy. If you have more nodes on there, you can get them to snap to so everything matches up. And snap to grid. I think that one's also awesome. That would be very useful too. You can snap it to whatever grid you set up on the back. And do use the grids. They help out quite a bit for straight lines and different things like that, and getting spacing done properly. And you can change the grid around to whatever size that you want. So do use grids. They're handy. And do use the guidelines. I use them all the time. I think they're brilliant. So here is if you want curved or straight. I just leave it on curved because then it puts the circle dots so you can pull them out, and that's awesome. Now these are some details then. We're going to play around with them afterwards once we get this down pat, but you have a whole bunch of different stitch styles, and they make the column stitches look completely different, and they're fun to play with, but we're going to play with them after. Envelope is kind of the same thing. It'll make side 1 or side 2 a jagged edge. Very handy. You can create some really fancy stuff. This one is both edges and a little bit more, and this one is, if you can see by the picture, a little bit shifted off. So very handy indeed. So we're going to set this at A because this is what we're going to start off with. Now, A is you digitize each side of the column. This is, we're going to do, not all of this, we're going to do halfway up this column. You digitize each side separately, so you do side 1 and then side 2. Column B is you go side to side, and that is probably what most people use. I find it a lot easier, but there are times where we can use A without any problem. And C keeps a constant width, so it's kind of the same thing, but you don't have the flexibility of changing the sides on it. So that's A, B, and C. Whatever you get comfortable with, use. Or if you want something, you know, that's the same, say for doing like, I don't know, like a Celtic knot or something where you have to make a lot of curves, you'll see with C that that works a lot better. You don't have to, it's less time, so it's time saving. And it'll look better. You get smoother curves, I think. It's completely different, but we can work on that. So those are your options. I pretty much leave all these off, probably just out of habit, but again, I think the snap to will work, and maybe the grid if you were making a nice straight line. So those are the basic parameters on here. Max random broadening, now we've gone through that on another video. That just makes it, The envelope is nice and smooth. It has a pattern to it. The random broadening would make it, the only way I could describe it is fuzzier, more jagged randomly. So you'll have a long bit, a short, long, and then a couple short ones. So it's really random and it's a nice look. And you can do side number 1 and side number 2. That's what those things are. And if you didn't know, you can add a gradient to any column stitch. Now gradients are kind of funny. The key with, and if we have time, we'll play around with the gradients and I'll show you. You pick your style that you want, and obviously the orange part is thicker and then it thins out. A lot of people get confused right here. They will do it and they'll pick gradient, they'll pick the one that they want and nothing happens. You must change this number. So, and it's higher than you think. 5 gradient isn't going to show up a lot. If that's what you want, if that's the effect, it's very subtle, that's fine. Start out at about 15 or 20, and then you can really see the difference, and then you can, dial it back from there. But always remember to change that number. Now, strips, we went through on the pumpkin one. It basically takes your column stitch, and instead of doing, stitches this way, it does strips of stitches this way. And you can set it up with the numbers that you want. Obviously, if it's really small, you don't want to put 21 lines in it. But it's a great effect. So if you master column stitches, you can do really nice light stitch designs or special effects simply by clicking strips. And you can play around with it, and yeah, I wouldn't mess with the density or anything like that. But you can, it won't hurt. And of course, there's also pull compensation going on. So if you feel you need to change that, that's fine. If you don't know what you're doing, then don't. I have a tendency to leave it just fine. There are occasions to change the density, of course, especially if you're doing applique. You can lay down your column stitches and then change the density for stitch number 2, the tack down stitch, and that's fine. So for this one, okay, let's start on A. So let's remember A, you do each side separately. So we're going to plot our stitches, and we're going to, there we go, and we're going to split stitches. So all I'm doing is holding down the left mouse key, and you can drag it out, and that's called splitting your stitches. And it just makes it a lot easier to get on with this. So for A, you split the stitches. So you place it down and you drag it over, and this dotted line is going to be showing you, I'll zoom in a bit there, is going to be showing you the angle, stitch angle. So we can move it there if we want. Now if you look right here, this one is side 1. Anytime you see this little one here with the lines out, it kind of looks like a star saying, hey, I'm number 1 right there. That's number 1. So we can go, and this one is one side and one side and one side. Now you have to try to ignore it seems to get a little messy, but it isn't. You have to ignore that because we're going to go do side 2 in a minute. All right, so that's our side 1, and doesn't that look like a mess? Yeah, it does. Now, that is the end of side 1. So if you click again, you're still doing side 1. You have to come back to the bottom, and it's side to side. So that's how you can remember it. I'm done side 1. Now I'm going on side 2. And you have to click to reselect this one. And then there you go. Click, 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 click. Okay, so it looks kind of empty. Now this will turn out perfectly. There are not too many. This kind of looks like the column stitch that we did before. There's not too many stitch directions, and we'd like this to be a bit smoother. So you can add more angle lines by simply clicking on the square ones, and you right click and you go to end of segment. So we're telling Embird that this is a little segment and we want some lines. And there you go. Now, this is the big difference. You have stitch control. You have angle lines. If you want it, a little smoother, you can just move it down. So let's do that again. activate it only on a square one, end of segment, and there we go. And that is probably pretty darn easy to do, end of segment, and we can make the angles go quite smoothly. So that's the thing to remember with A, is one side, then the other. So usually a lot of people, most people, if they like A, they do A all the time. If they like B, they do B all the time. A lot of people switch it up, but you just have to remember which one you're in, because you digitize B a different way completely and C a different way, and it might get confusing. So if it's not looking right, then go up here and check to see what side you're on, which letter you're on. So let's generate that and have a little look. And let's go into 3D. We're up kind of close. Let's do 3D flat. See the nice angles? I didn't finish them up the top, so then they start going straight. But see how beautiful that looks? That would stitch out gorgeously. Absolutely, absolutely gorgeous. And that's why it's so much better than the auto column. You can use auto column, but this is better. So let's do another one, and I'm going to show you why A is really good. Go there, and let's make sure we're in A. We are in A. Okay, so A is do one side, then the other. So let's put our stitch down, and then hold down your left mouse, and you split it, and we're going to go there. So we're going to go up this side, but we're going to do something different. Just because the picture's there doesn't mean you have to stick with it, right? So we can do this side like this, which is pretty cool actually. You can get a big difference. It's not going to look great on our flower, of course. Then let's go in here and pull out these, my favorite things, the curve dots. This is going to look a little weird, but I'm exaggerating it so you guys can get the exact idea why this is so awesome and why this will change everything. And you know, you can also go in, if you want to do it like this, you can also go in and change it like that. Okay, so I've done one side. Now I've got to click here and do the other. Now for this side, I am just going to do it not straight, it's still curvy. I'm just going to do it curvy. You don't have to do the sides exactly the same, which is awesome. I can think a lot of times where that's applicable. Now again, we don't have a whole lot of, we just have the front and we have the back for angle lines. So it's going to just do it itself. If you want to add angle lines, you can. Now, where it's going to work is you pick an angle line and it's going to pick a square on the other side. So this one's okay, so let's do that. Let's do right click, end of segment. That's good. This one is going to match up with that one. That'll be fine too. Right click, end of segment. Now we can move that. It's probably, I don't want to ruin my curve, so let's move this one down. See how that works? So let's do this one, right click, end of segment. That's way too high, so I didn't put enough nodes on this side, but that's okay. We can add nodes. So we're going to move this down. You don't have to move the circle, but I'm going to fix the curve. So you see how that works? So if this is great for lettering, your fancy lettering too, because one side can go kind of crazy. There isn't anything on that one, so we need to add a node, but we won't. So do you see how that works? And I think that's really cool. So one side is straight, the other side is kind of groovy looking, and you go to generate, and let's go into 3D. How's that for a satin stitch? That may be a little bit too big. This one's okay. Probably not the dip there, but see how that looks? Now I didn't have a node. I didn't add another node, and you see how messy that kind of looks? It's not too bad, but these stitch angles are perfectly how I want them. So hopefully everyone gets that. That is A, and that's really easy. Up one side, click down at the other side, and go up the other side. You can probably digitize stuff really quickly and make fancy, you know, column stitches to outline just about anything. And again, it adds, obviously that doesn't add anything because it's kind of terrible, but it adds flair, more professional more in-depth work to it. I love column stitches. Everybody should use them as much as possible. Okay, let's go on to the one probably everyone knows, and that's B. So let's pick up our tool again. Let's go to B. Now B is side to side, and there's a couple of tricks to it, but once you get it, it's easy to figure out. So click and then click. You don't split these ones, but let's see, am I going to do it right? No, I did it wrong because I didn't look. I kind of did that on purpose, but anyways, we can have it. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. A lot of people start off and they do a crisscross and then they delete it and then they start again and they do the same thing again, they do the same thing again. I just fixed it, and I find that's the easiest way to do it. Now you can take a breath and you can just keep going on. So let's do it again, okay? So let's do side. Whoops, I got to activate one of these end ones. Now, when I activate it, I don't know if you can see that. Check out where my mouse is. Right there on the circle node, there are arrows. And that is your key to figuring out B. Probably everyone will remember that and shoot me later. That is your key to figuring out B. That line is directional, but it tells you this was the last node clicked, so you must go to the other side. And look, I didn't cross over. I didn't cross over. I didn't do anything. Now there's a couple ways. Dawn likes to plot each and fix each. I like to plot it all, then fix it all. Either way works. But again, you have your directional lines. Let's look at this. This is the last one that I did, so it's this side that you go on. That's how you do it. Now these are, of course, the directional lines, so we can, let's make this a little bit prettier. Slam them down, and you go, uh-oh, there's nothing there, there's no arrow. You have to activate one of the last ones, and it doesn't matter which one. You just know that you just do opposite, opposite, opposite. So I find it easier just to do this, do a whole bunch, right? And we're changing the width of it, and it'll be pretty. And then I go back in and I fix them. I go back in and I fix them once I've done a complete stitch. And there we go. Let's change this angle because that's going to look terrible probably. We can move this one up a little bit. And that's fantastic. Now, another thing that confuses a lot of people, if you stop to make an adjustment, okay, there's my arrow, so it goes right there. If you stop to make an adjustment and you go, okay, I want that in a point. Okay, that's what I want right there. You can't finish. You can't do anything. Okay, and people go, wow, I just did all that work. What it wants is another node. You haven't completed it. So once you put the right number of nodes in, and zoom in so you can see what you're doing, but once you put the right number of nodes in, then you can generate. And just try to remember that. It's a lot easier to do. Now, if you wanted to end that kind of nicely, you can almost make a point. I wouldn't put them on top of each other, but you can taper it just by moving them. If you don't want a square edge, again, that's another difference between, excuse me, between just plain old satin stitches. They always have to have a square end, always. And if you notice, and it doesn't really matter where you put them, you have to watch your size and how it's going to look. But if you notice, we started off on a curve, and you can't do that with satin stitches. So let's generate that, and you can see that's like, wow, I made a mistake there. I need to fix my angle because there's a bit of a gap there. So all that means, you can see I changed them so you can see them. Can we see it on 3D better? Yeah, a little bit. See, there's a gap there, and you go, oh no, start again. No, no, don't start again. Let's go. I'm going to show you something too with all of them. Parameters. You can't edit the nodes. What the heck, right? Okay, so let's go here. You have to go to the node editing. Now we can edit the nodes. Now, do you see what happened there? This one's curved, that one's straight and up, and this one is way down. So all I have to do to fix that is just move that at a better angle. So once you get used to it, B is probably the easiest. I'm not really sure. I tend to use it more, just old dog, new tricks, one of those. But look at that, isn't that fantastic? And it wasn't that hard to do. See, I fixed the gap. Now remember, we're close up. I could probably fix it a little bit more because I still see it. The 3D isn't the all-ending thing. I don't think that would show up too badly. But fix it if you want. Again, you go into nodes. Parameters, you can go into that if you want to change the stitch thing. Let's see how we're doing for time. Yeah, we have time. I'm going to, because this is a nice column, okay, I understand the angles are off a little bit. I'm going to show you what you can do with these. Let's, though, first, I usually do that, cancel. Let's go into 3D so you can really see the effects. So right-click, parameters. Let's play around with this. Remember I said we were going to play? Let's do this one because I can't tell what that is. Can you? Now you can. Look at that. How's that for a cool effect? If you wanted, that almost looks like there's a satin stitch on it. And that was just one click. Just one click. Let's try this one. Excellent. That almost looks like a double satin. I love it. Absolutely love it. Now these ones look, let's do this one. It's just changing the stitch points. Look at that. That is like strips, only better and thicker. I can see like for a leaf or a stalk of something or outlining something. Oh, awesome. Oops, picked the wrong one. Really easy to do. Just really easy. They even have one there for wide satin. So I'm just clicking apply. That one's kind of groovy. I like it. So you can, there's a whole bunch to choose from. Once you get your satin stitches down, that's what you do. Just play around with it. So that's, see, I like that one too. Can't you picture that on something? Super effect, and everyone will wonder how the heck you did that, because to me, it looks like a satin stitch in the middle with thin satin stitches on the outside. That would be great for any kind of a border or even fancy swirlies, as long as it's big enough. Obviously, if you're going to make it so small that, you know, this side is closer to that side, you won't have the effect. But this is the perfect width for it. So awesome. Let's put that back to normal and apply. Now let's have a nice look at the envelopes. So envelopes are a little bit different than the other one. So let's go. This is an even design. So let's click on it and I'll show you what it does. That's pretty cool. It looks kind of weird because we're close up, so we can zoom away. See what a nice effect that is? I really like it. So that's one. Now this one, you can see the pattern. One tall one, one small one, one medium one. So let's see how that's going to look. That is pretty cool. You can, I would get rid of the underlay, so we can see it better because we've got all sorts of underlay running through. Now you can see it clearly. What do you think? That is a neat effect. That almost looks like if you put another one, you could have a feather. Just simply like that. You can play around with it. So we just did another one. Now you can see clearly how it matches. Long stitch, that, small, medium, long. You can see it really clearly on that. So really special effects, awesome. Really easy with column stitches. So this one is both sides. That looks really cool. I like it. And this is just a little bit different on both sides. Awesome. So if you can master the column stitches, you can make, I call them special effects stitches. So let's see the difference. Let's put it back. Let's see the difference between this envelope, which is nice and regular, to max random broadening. So side one, which if I remember correctly was this side, but I could be wrong. I forgot what I did because I've changed it already. Let's do a big difference. Now see how that changes? And I was wrong apparently. That's side one. See how it changes? Let's put it up a little bit more so we can get more of a dramatic effect. Yeah, see, it's random. It isn't one long, one short, one long, one short, one long, one short. And I think that's really cool. And I think that would be a really nice thing on just about anything. It's almost like a fur stitch, but satiny fur stitch, so maybe not applicable for that. You can do both sides, too. You can do both sides of it. Let's do that. And now that makes it fuzzy. So the stitches are, you can do, you know, have total control. You can do the angles, and changing the angles, you see, will change how the stitches look. and you can change each side. So in my mind, that's total control of the stitches, and play around and you can get different effects quite easily. You can also do minus too, by the way, and it'll just bring the stitches back in. So instead of the max random broadening going that way, it's going to go back that way. So it'll in effect make this thinner. So okay, let's apply that back to normal. Now gradient, kind of cool with satin stitches. Remember, you have to pick the one that you want and then put the numbers up. Now let's just start with a smaller number and see if we can see it well enough, because this is pretty small. You kind of can, but let's do it a little bit more dramatic so you guys can see. A lot of people didn't realize that you can do gradients on satin stitches, and you can. You can see that it's heavier down at the bottom and lighter at the top. So if you wanted to do, mirror this, you could overlap it a bit and change the color, and it would be a color blend on a satin stitch, which you may think is a very advanced technique. It just isn't. It's pretty easy to do. So set your gradient, copy it over. You have to merge them. Obviously, you don't want to merge it where they're really tight, but you can merge it here and it would have the same gradient effect. So you can increase that effect. Let's do it just a little bit. How about we click on the word and make it just a little faster. 20? Yeah, let's try that and apply. And now you can really see it. You can really see the difference. So let's try another gradient. Let's try this one and apply and see how that looks. Just a little bit different, not a whole lot. This one is heavy on sides and in the middle. That is really cool. You could even use that one if you had something in between and didn't want to do two different things on it. That would be fine. So you can play around with gradients. How awesome is that for column stitches? So just a few special effects I threw in there because I just think they're absolutely awesome. And while we're at it, let's do the strips. And you just click on strips and it's going to take all this off because it's basically a different kind of stitch for it. But I'm going to show you quickly what it is. Now I picked 7. So that is 7 rows in there. If you look closely, they all follow neatly. And I think that looks really cool. We did a few effects with it with a pumpkin, and I'm just right-clicking. 3 is as low as you can go, but see how that looks? And that's how you make light and airy stitch outs. And it still follows along, and it still looks great. You can mess around with these and get a different, the minimum length and the maximum length, and get a completely different look. But for now, we are going to just keep it simple. There we go. That's a bit thicker. It really looks better with less. I kind of liked 7. You can see a little bit of the fabric behind it. Awesome. So if you can master the stitches, the column stitches, you can change your whole style of embroidery. You could even take one design that has, column stitches everywhere, and you can change it to that, and you can have 2 designs. If you were stitching it on something like a sweatshirt, you could do it with the thick satin stitches. And if you wanted a lighter design, maybe for a tea towel or something, I don't know what design you put on a sweatshirt and a tea towel, but there it is. That's all you would have to do. Block the whole thing, switch it to strips, set the numbers, check it out. Easy peasy. And I love it. I love it for that. I think that's great. Let's go back to normal. Now, oh, see, it even looks cool on there. But sorry to say, we're going to get rid of that. So let's go to the last one. So we're going to get the tool, the column tool, click up here, and we're going to go to C. Now this one is completely different than the other two, of course. It still has its benefits to it. It still has a lot of benefits, and it might make some things easier. So for this one, for C, we're going to split the stitches. So I put my first one down, and then I'm going to pull that one over. Now I'm going to do it a little bit quickly, but I want to point out that it's a constant width. So your first and second stitches, this is my first here, and this is my second stitch, is going to define the whole width of the whole thing. So if you look up here to the right, This is the width. Now if I move these guys a little bit closer, or even if I place this one just a little bit better, you can see that it changed. I moved it further apart. So depending on what you want, see how that number changes? Obviously that's way too big for a satin stitch. That is not going to work out. This moves both sides together. So for doing this one, you click basically in the middle. It's not a side to side thing. It's not up one side, down the other. We're going to click in the middle. Now see, this wouldn't be the greatest for this one because it's the same width. But see how easy that is? So we're just clicking in the middle. That's done a fairly nice curve just for that. However, you can go back and you can adjust, but look what it does when you move it. It does both sides. So if you want to change the curve, look what you can do. Look what you can do just by moving it around. So you can make really smooth curves with C. And again, if you're doing something, I was trying to think of a really good example. If you were trying to do a Celtic knot where you had to, they're very intricate, but you could do it, let's activate the last one, you could do it really quickly. Now that looks a bit square because I wasn't placing it properly, but look, you just bend them and they're always going to be the same width no matter what you do to them. That, even if I smoothed it out, is a very quick candy cane right there. So you click in the middle and then you move things around. Now if we generate this, it looks excellent. It's a little bit wide, but that's okay. Yeah, Embird did it. It kind of looks pretty weird. Now, what if you want a tapered edge? Because again, this one's kind of slanted up. This one is just flat out. What are we gonna do there? Okay, let's go into, remember you can't do parameters. You have to do edit nodes. Now, when you go in here, you can see that it's on C, and if you look at the picture, it shows you. You can switch to A. You can switch to A. Now I can move them independently. Just like that, generate. And now we have a tapered edge. You could put them closer. So you don't necessarily have to do the same thing. You can, move it around. If you wanted to change this, let's go into this. If you wanted to change this, it's now on A, so you could maybe move it a little bit if you wanted it. You can go in and say, like, well, that's way too thick and it didn't follow the curve enough. Switch it to A, and then you can fix everything up. And you don't have to re-digitize anything. Okay, you got to move quite a few nodes, but you don't have to redo it. You can switch to how you want. And I think that's really convenient, really nice. Let's try doing this over top. It's going to look kind of weird. But you can switch it around. See, now that made it perfect. And then all of this here is the same width, and it came down to a nice tapered edge. Awesome. So that's what C is. So remember, A is you go up one side. So you go up one side, that is your last one, and then you have to click on side 2, the beginning. So that's the end of, if we're starting at the bottom, that's the end, and this is the beginning. So one side, then the other. And if you find that easy, super, you can do that. B is side to side. You just have to pay attention to where you're plotting it and make sure you put the last one in. If you can't generate it, you need to put another stitch somewhere. And C is to keep everything even. So when you're starting to digitize something, you can decide what stitch you think would be best. A and B are the same, the same results. C is going to keep everything even. So this is thicker in the bottom and thin at the top. So obviously C's out of the question. And then it's just a matter of choice what you want to do. If you like the side to side, or one side and then start again on the other. It's still easy to do. You just got to remember which one that you're on. So, and also remember to edit nodes, right? Edit nodes instead of parameters. You can go to parameters if you want. If you like the shape and you want to change, you know, a few things on it. Now, we have a few minutes. Hopefully everybody gets all that, and go over it again in the video and just remember and write it down. If you're writing something, A is one side, click on the bottom, go to the other. B is side to side, pay attention to your arrows, and C keeps everything the same, and you click in the middle. In the middle. That confuses a lot of people. Let me show you just quickly two more things that happen, why people get confused, and I hear it all the time from people. So I just click to C, and this one is here, and then you click in the middle, and it's going to, the idea of it is that you are following the curve, and you see I click them closer. A lot of people forget that they're in C, and they want to do, they think they're in B, and they do this, and they do this, and they do this, and what a mess that just made. What a mess that just made. So remember, C, you click in the middle, so you can nicely follow this curve. Obviously this doesn't work, and this is why, because it's, you know, not as thick at the top as it is on the bottom. But you can see how nicely that curve followed. So that's just a point if you remember how to do them. And if you get confused, if you're making a mess and you've got dotted lines everywhere, just look at what you're in, and then you can remember how to do it. So another thing I would, minimum and maximum sizes for satin stitch. Yeah, we can, it depends what you're stitching it on, the minimum and maximum sizes. I'm going to show you just quickly here the difference of what you can tell just by doing on Embird, and it's a bit of stitching out. You can, of course, do higher density stitches on a sweatshirt or a thick blanket than you can do on, you know, a t-shirt. You have to keep it a bit lighter. Generally though, don't mess with the densities, but I'm going to show you something that, what did I pick? I can't see, it's underneath my thing. Let's do C just because it's easy. Plot it, split stitches, hit in the middle. Now, if I was making that really wide, let's say, let's make it really go super wide, and that's probably not big enough. Let's see, now it's still crossed over. How can I do this? Let's just make it big then. So this is obviously outrageous for a satin stitch. Now you see what happens there? That's exactly what happens. If you see that, then you know it's too wide. And you have to be a little bit careful with column stitches with that. They will get caught if it manages to go across and you are, you know, doing it just at its threshold. These are kind of loose, and I wouldn't change the density because you got to think about push-pull. You can obviously play around with it, but you got to think about push-pull compensation on everything that you're stitching. Obviously this one doesn't work, so let me put this back and I'll just do a quick explanation of that. Generate. So we did it big enough. So let's think about this, how the stitches are going. They're going from one side to another. And every time they go, if you change the density of this and make it, the density would make the stitches closer together or further apart. Further apart is easier. But you got to think about the push-pull going on. So every time it makes a stitch like this, it's pulling the material in. And if you have a ton of them, you are going to have gaps, you're going to have puffiness and pulls right here. So you have to be really careful messing with density. Same goes with, you know, regular flat stitches. That's what push-pull compensation is. And the button that you click and the percentage is just making this a little bit wider to compensate for the push-pull. So, for example, if you're doing this and you make it really dense, and it's pulling stuff in, everything else over here that you're stitching is going to be out of registration. Why? Because you've pulled the fabric and the hoop over. So yes, you can play around with the density and different things density is for. Let's make it just something dramatic, and you can see the difference. So that doesn't look very good, right? Even if you added pull comp. Let's make it really dense, and you can see one is as far as you can go. Look how that changes, and you don't really want to do that. So you can a little bit. Either way, obviously making it less dense is better. That's regular. See how that changed? And that would, I think if you did it like that, you would probably break a needle. But play around with it. Generally just leave it until you figure out what you want. It does change how your stitches look, but remember to add some pull compensation if you are going to make it really dense. So the last thing I wanted to show you is, let me get rid of this, and we're going to go here. So this is the column stitch, and right beneath it is cool. If you can master the column stitches, you can do a lot of stuff, and it's basically a fill stitch. So I can show you, it's the same way that you do. We've got the A, B, and C. However, instead of doing, you know, just the basic column stitches, satin stitches that goes from side to side, and it really has a good effect. This will be really gorgeous. You can do it in a flat stitch, but I think if you do it in a column stitches, you can get all the details, and it kind of makes it stand out. But this isn't the greatest example, but I'm gonna show you how to do this. So let's do it on B because I like B. So we're gonna do this, and we're gonna do this, and let's try this. See, it's the same thing, same thing. The really good thing is the difference between this and just doing a regular, you know, flat stitches. Obviously, it's not, like I said, not the greatest example. Look at all the directional lines you have. So you can then make this a little bit better. Why don't we dip it in a little bit so it maybe matches the leaf? But you can mess around with the directional lines on it. Awesome, really easy to do. If you want, you know, it to go in a different, of course, you just move it, right? So if you find that really easy, and you might even use it just for the practice, that's how you do it. Now let's generate that. Then we're going to go back in and change something. Let's look at it in 3D. See how it does it? And that's a little bit different. It gives it more of a contour here. And that's a little bit different than using the tool over on the left just for the fill stitches. Let me just do one really quickly, right? Let's do, I don't know, a square-ish thing. Generate. See, that's neat and tidy, and it goes from one side to another. But see, that has a little more definition to it. So you can do it, and I think that's awesome. Let's go to parameters, and we can do a couple of different things. So it's a fill stitch. So when you have a fill stitch, look, you can change the full fill stitch. So let's put it on a design one. But see, it's not perfectly straight. It's a little bit warped here and a little bit warped there. It would give everything a little more contour. And I really like it, and I really think it's a better way to do flat stitches, you know, add a little more interest. But you see, it's not straight and perfect and just kind of, it's kind of bent that way. Doesn't that look great? Hopefully that's new to everyone, and hopefully you guys do it, because I think that's fantastic. See, even that has a great effect because of the angle lines. Now I messed around with these ones and I moved them up and down a little bit, but I think that looks great. That was cells. I was going to do random because I kind of like that. Even that has a different look. They're kind of bunched up a little bit there. So then what you can do, of course, is you can play with the envelope and take it even further. That doesn't look the greatest, but you get the idea, right? It kind of takes it from halfway. So as on the column stitches, you could really see it. This one you can't see a whole lot. Let's do both sides. So it's kind of, if you wanted to, we use this for shading. If you want to create kind of shading, it's a little bit difficult to see. I don't know if I can change the color. Let me generate. Let me see if you guys can, because I really want you guys to understand. Yeah, that's a little bit better. If you wanted to do a little bit of shading, that's how a very fast way of doing it. really easy to do. Of course, you have to master the A, B, and C, learn your ABCs, but you can change stitches, and again, making fancy stuff, that actually looks kind of cool. That kind of looks like, to me, a crumpled up leaf, and this will be thinner. You have to obviously have embroidery underneath it, or it looks like you kind of mix the stitches, but it's almost a way of doing a gradient, but a little more subtle for a gradient. And it's awesome. I absolutely think it's awesome. What also helps is taking off the auto underlay. It tends to make that look a lot better. Most of that was underlay. So now we can see it. That one I don't like. Let's bring it up a little bit. See how that looks? See how that looks? Now they're all not perfectly straight. It's still maintaining the curve and it's still maintaining the cutout, but it's a little bit jagged, a little bit thinner. And if you had a thinner embroidery under there, you would have, when you stitched it out, it doesn't look like much in 3D. Always remember that about gradients as well. It doesn't look like that much in 3D, but when you stitch it out, you will get a little bit of a blend here. So a super way to add shading, just a quick amount of shading. So you guys can play with that quite a bit. See, that is also cool too. That would be neat for, like, if you're doing, not in pink, but if you were doing a variegated leaf, that this would be darker than this. You can do, there's different ways of doing shading, but I find this quite handy. And again, let's change, now that we have a different thing there, let's change to wood. See, again, different look. It just gives it texture, and if you put embroidery underneath it, it will give you shading or a little bit of interest, a little bit of something different, and it's not hard to do. People will say, how did you do that? Wow, okay, there you go. That is how I did it. It's super easy. And play around with it until you get the look that you want. You can do this with the regular stitches to an extent, but not quite with this level of control. And that's what doing columns A, B, and C, see, that gives it a complete different look. It looks more like a dead leaf, but that's okay. Let's try that one. So you can get super completely different looks really easy. Now there's user defined here, and we are going to do that in one class, and we're going to have a motif class, and I'm going to teach you how to make your own motifs, and then you can play around with them. But you can do your own, make your user defined patterns. You can do, it has to be a certain way, but you can do something personal. I know with the motif stitches, you can put someone's initial, and you could fill this whole leaf with a stitch with the letter S on it, or J or M, and people look at that, and you look at it from a distance because you keep them kind of close together, and they go, all right, that's a cool stitch, and then they look up and they realize it's your initial in it or monogram. Wow, cool. But that is for another day. Hopefully I have everyone's interest with that, because it's super fun to do it. I love to do it. So for homework, I would like everyone to do this whole leaf. Of course, think outside the box, but try to, or this whole leaf, this whole flower, think outside the box, but try to think outside the box with satin stitches or the ABC fill stitches. Try to use that to do it. Now, you can use the satin stitches, the column stitches on the outside, and then the ABC column stitches with a fill on the inside, and come up with different patterns for each petal. There's probably about 100 different ways you can do the leaf. You can fill it with full stitches and cut out these parts and do it. And remember your plotting. So with the column stitches, you can't go off on a section. So you do this part, but these are kind of underneath. So you want to have, you have to do this part, and then, you know, just change it around for that. But come up with something different, but think column A, B, or C where it applies. Now, just because this is a different length a little bit, the leaves, doesn't mean that you can't do a little C column just for the practice of it. Remember, C, you click in the middle. So, oh, why'd you mute me there, Dawn? So anyways, that's your homework for today. If you guys have any questions, we have a few minutes left in class. I didn't leave as much as I probably should, but column stitches are so darn exciting, and we just had to go all the way with it. So if you have any questions, you can text them, type them to Don, and he'll relay them to me. And if you need me to go over A, B, and C, the rules, because you didn't write them down because I said it too fast, I can do that. And I promise you, once you get A, B, and C straight and get using them and making really nice satin column curves, your embroidery will change. Your digitizing will change quite a bit. So are there any questions? Dawn, are you there? Dawn, any questions? Well, I can hear you. Well, as long as you didn't do it through the whole teaching video, it just came up, you're muted by organizer. I'm like, thanks a lot, Dawn. Oh, you just clicked on the wrong one. Well, that's okay. We'll forgive you. So everyone do their homework. If you get stuck, send us an email, ask a good question. Find us on Facebook. We will be putting up of course, Don will be sending you the video so you can go over it. It was a lot of information. I understand that. If you take it step by step, you take A, B, and C one at a time and practice it on your flower at home, you will be sure to get it right and keep doing it. Keep trying. If you get frustrated, it's because you're doing the wrong way for the A, B, or C. You can't click in the middle for A or B. It's not going to work. You can for C. So try to take a breath and work on that. Join us on Facebook. That's our that's our busiest place for questions. A lot of people attend the classes, so you can ask questions there. Our Facebook group is Embird Happy Digitizing, and a lot of people talk about the classes, so if you missed something or didn't understand something, that is a perfect venue for that. So on Facebook, it's Embird Happy Digitizing. I am going to call it now. Some people are leaving. One more chance for questions. Any questions? Any questions? Probably everyone has to think a little bit about this one because it was a lot of information, and hopefully everyone's really eager to get at their flowers, which have A, B, and C columns on them, and make some gorgeous embroidery, absolutely gorgeous embroidery. So hopefully make sure everyone downloads the flower too. We'll send it to you. Don's going to, it usually takes him a couple hours, but he will send you an email with your free video. And we also put it up for sale on our website at OML Digitizing, so if you know someone who wants it and couldn't make the class, that's where they can find it. So Don's going to stay on for a minute. I am going to say good night, everyone. Thank you for attending class. Keep calm and digitize on. And happy digitizing to everyone, and happy using column stitches.